Hello, folks. Welcome to the Genuinely Interested podcast. I'm your host, Roy Bensby. This podcast is an opportunity for me to speak with some of the most interesting people I know, either with amazing talents or achievements or unbelievable life stories or just invaluable insights into areas which they have dedicated their lives to studying. I sit down with these amazing individuals from across the planet and I try to ask them questions that will hopefully help you, the listener, extract something valuable or learn something new or just hopefully get inspired by. You can find all the episodes for the podcast on all the major podcasting platforms such as iTunes, Spotify, Google, Overcast, iHeartRadio, literally all of them. It's there. If you love the show, if it adds value to your life in any way, shape, or form, please leave reviews on iTunes. It really helps grow the podcast. It puts it up there so more people can see it. You can also find all the episodes and everything else, all the information that's updated regularly on the website, which is roybensv.com, ROYBENTZVI.com. And you can sign up for updates as well. Also been updating the YouTube channel. So I've been uploading old episodes pretty much on a daily basis. So you can find it there. And in the future, I hope to make video podcasting as well. If that's something you guys want to check out and are interested in, please shoot me email. I'd love to hear from you. And also make sure to check out the social media platforms, Instagram and Twitter. I post there daily. And lastly, if you guys want to support and help grow the podcast, please go to Buy Me a Coffee or Anchor or Patreon. It is an endeavor to grow this podcast and make it what it should be. And it takes a village. So I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. I see that there are literally listeners from all over the world in each and every country. So thank you to everyone and on to the show. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for tuning in to yet another fantastically entertaining and insightful episode. This week on the podcast, I have Ilana Golan, or without that accent, Ilana Golan. Either way, Ilana is, she's a fascinating lady. She is the first woman to become a commander in charge of training all F-16 pilots in Israel in a simulator. She is a keynote speaker. She's an entrepreneur. She's an investor, founder of Golan Ventures and CareerLeap, also an adventurer, a mountaineer, someone who loves to travel and see the world and experience and immerse herself in the culture as much as possible. This episode is just packed with really great information. It's like a ripe fruit just waiting to be eaten at that right time. So I'm sure you guys are going to enjoy it. We cover everything from her early life to her professional life to some do's and don'ts of in the tech world, what is perceived to be success versus what is actual success. We talk about her mountaineering adventures and how she probably travels a little bit different with her family than most people travel with their family, which is, I think it's amazing. I think it's fascinating. So we cover a lot of different topics and really fun podcast. So make sure you listen to the whole thing. I'm sure you're going to love it. So yeah, without further ado, here is Ilana Golan. Enjoy the episode, friends.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
Hey, that's exciting. Hi.
How you doing?
I'm really good. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks for. I'm excited that you are here. I've been doing a little bit of research, and one of the reasons I started the podcast because I'm interested in people. I guess it's two things. One, I'm interested in people that have amazing life stories, and two is that amazing thing people that have potentially built or do amazing things, people that are amazing athletes or have built amazing companies. And you're kind of a combination of both.
Yeah. I like adventures. I like being out of my comfort zone, I guess. So yeah, I try a lot of different things, some successful, some less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of it. I was I was on Twitter this morning, as I am unfortunately most mornings, and I was reading this Twitter thread. I forget the guy's name, but he's built a bunch of companies, and he made this really long thread about the company that he did. Essentially, it was like a to do multitasking type company where you can share the tasks, kind of like an Asana or
Right.
one of these other apps, and it completely failed, right? And they put a lot of money into it. But it was fascinating because most people don't put their failures; they only put their success stories up.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of times you can learn more from failure than from success,
I
because success is
so agree.
yeah.
I so agree. And one of the things that I keep saying to people, don't compare your beginning to someone else's success, right? Because you don't know their journey. You don't know what it looked like in the beginning. You don't know how many failures they had along the journey and how many, sleepless nights and, hard times. And, we look at their success and we're like, I want to be that. I want to look like that. But they didn't just born like that. I mean, it took them time. And some of these companies like that are considered an overnight success have been like struggling for 10 years, right? So it's one of those things that we just don't take into perspective.
Even Clubhouse now, that's become kind of all the rage. I read some story about them. This has been a progress, or a development in progress for about 8 years or so. So this overnight success is an overnight 8 years in progress overnight
Right.
success.
And then the question is, how many of us would persevere through something like this for 8 years? And I think this is a question for every single one of us. Are we doing something that we believe in so much that we're willing to take the beating for 5, 10 years to really make it a success? And I think this is where a lot of us fail, right? Because we don't have the bandwidth, we don't feel it, we don't have the grit, and we give up, and we give up early. We give up just right before the gold. So
Yeah. Well, it's hard because it's not like there's no guarantee, right? There's not like, okay, you put in 8 years. At the eight of those 8 years, I guarantee
yeah,
you'll be a unicorn, and you're gonna. It's an unknown, right? You could be pouring money and work and your life, attentions and everything for 8, 10 years, and come out with nothing. Like, you would come out with a lot of experience, obviously, but
right.
the end result could be nothing.
True. Although there's a lot of, some say that success has footprints, and you can see if something is working. I think one of the things that are a little misleading today is that we have a little bit, and I don't know if we want to go into this, but there is a little bit of a um, misconception between success and how much money companies raised. Right. And success is
Yeah,
not the
yeah,
amount of money company raise. Success is how much
yeah.
impact they do, how much of the habit people or companies are willing to change based on that company. It's the revenue. Like, there's a lot of other metrics for success, but how much money they raise is not necessarily part of it. And the problem is that right now we're confusing the two. So this is where it becomes a little convoluted. I don't know if this is where you want to go, but I'm just saying, success has clues along the journey, and you can see if people are starting to change their habit due to your product or due to what their service. And you can see if something is taking off. And if it's not, change course. That was Clubhouse, right? They changed course again and again, and they did it in a smart way. They did a lot of experimentation, just like people need to do with their career. And eventually they found something that sticks, and we'll see how long it sticks, right? I mean, but they found something that right now looks like it's sticking. So this is really, I think it's a lot about experimentation. It's a lot about grit and looking honestly at, is this working out?
Yeah, I think I 100% think you're right, and I would love to go into this because I think what the media does often, and maybe we're also guilty of this, is they'll say, "Oh, look at Quibi, they've raised $1 billion. Look
Great
at
example, right?
you know Theranos and all these other companies," and they're not looking at what what impact they've had, what have they actually sold, what is the none of that matters. It's like, which is impressive. It's not that it's not impressive. It's very impressive raising a lot of money, but that seems to be the metric. If they've raised money, that equates to success. And that's, I think, where a lot of people get that confused. And I think a lot of people in also like the tech world are guilty of that as
Yeah.
well.
And
They put that as some sort of vanity metric.
I agree. And I think at some point this bubble needs to burst in some ways, right? Because the metrics need to become better. There was too many unicorns that got bankrupt, right? And now it's a question then what are we measuring? Right. Now, the problem is that all of us have, in our heads, we have the web vans of the world or, the Quibbies of the world, which obviously were not successful. And then we also have WhatsApp, which, was acquired for $19 billion. Like, heck yes, and how much revenue did they have at that point? But they had the impact, they had the reach, they had literally people changing habits because of WhatsApp, right? They had the market share, which is big. So I think this is where you need to kind of like say, is this, what are we measuring and what are we defining as success? And is this, what we want to celebrate, right? Because I think it is about celebration, right? And people want to feel successful. And if everybody's celebrating how much money they raise, they go and try to raise money instead of just making money out of your current product or service. Like, let's lift it off the ground. Let's, look at MailChimp and GitHub and a bunch of others that were able to lift themselves off the ground really successfully without anything. So, it is possible. I think it's just that with media and everything, we're just kind of like trying to chase our tails there. And it is changing the market a little bit. And I think at some point we'll need to kind of swing back and get back to reality of, some reality checks. What is success?
Yeah. I think the bootstrappers are celebrated in hindsight, right? After they've succeeded, they're like, okay, look at this company. They bootstrapped for 2 years. It was it was hard, but now they're successful. Where the people that raise pre-seed millions of dollars, they're celebrated right away. Like, this is amazing. This company or this guy, or girl
Right.
at the head of the company raised a lot of money, celebrated right away, goes in the media. So I think that's
It's a faster success, right? Quote unquote success. It's a faster success, right? So, and especially today when things are moving so fast, we want the pace, we want the speed, we want to hear about people. Now, the truth is that there's also, and again, stop me, if this is not where we want to go, but there's also a chicken and egg because the whole venture capital is also built on the fact that people will have successes, right? Because they need those successes to raise the next round of funding, right? So to some extent, they need that media to talk about the success. They need the people to raise the next round because these are the successes that the actual venture capitals take and raise their next round. So everything is kind of built on top of this. And I assume
like
at
a
some point
closed
it's
loop
gonna,
feed.
yeah. So it's feeding itself, right? They need the media, and they need to celebrate it, and that's why everybody's celebrating it, and it continues. I just assume that at some point it's going to burst because eventually these things will just not have as many exit as their promise. The promised land is not necessarily coming, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
The media is funny. It likes to celebrate, but it likes to celebrate the demise of big companies as well. So they like it on both ends of that spectrum. All right, so we we got into all that really quickly. I want to talk a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your story. Where'd you grow up? Where you born? How you are in the position that you are today.
Okay. So first of all, funny enough, I'm Israeli, but I was born in Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah. My dad was in the university, so I happened to be born there. But in general, I grew up in Israel, went to the military, to the Air Force. After that, engineering school, electric engineering, started with Intel there, but eventually realized that I love customer facing. A lot of it is happening here, especially at the 2000. And we moved here very early to Silicon Valley, California. And from that point on, it was basically, a lot about startups. I fell in love with the big impact in small companies. This is where I saw myself. And I also found that I have an edge, understanding the Israeli culture, understanding the American culture, having, decent English to,
Yeah.
to carry myself
Very
through.
good English.
Thanks. And then just combination of being technical, but also understanding the customer needs. So this is kind of where I really thrive. So I went to, I was part of some companies, some small companies that were acquired, like Veracity, that was acquired by Cadence. I started Quali here in the US, the tech operations, to really grow it here. And it was amazing to see from literally like buying the printer and the router to 5 sites, 15 million yearly revenue, blah, blah, blah. Like we were literally taking off. It was amazing to see. And then I started, my own company. And through some failures, some successes, one was acquired. And I decided to take the money and really kind of go after my passion of helping Israeli companies grow in in North America. I did it in a few different hats. I'm still on the board and general partner of a network venture, helping Israeli companies grow in North America through a vast Jewish network. We have like 150 investors in the fund, etc. So it's really amazing. And started writing in Forbes, public speaking, and then I realized that I have a gift to just jump between different things, and I can do it pretty successfully. And I realized that gift, a lot of people that are feeling stuck, like I was at some point, was like a technical hat. They want to find their meaning. They want to find what's next. They want to realize, like, leverage their full potential and unleash that potential and become, the best version of themselves. And they're not sure how to do it. And I decided that this is a skill that should be taught. And I decided to literally take an engineered process and engineer my process and teach it to others. So now, I started another business of helping professionals and executives that want, feel a little stuck or want more from their career to really reinvent themselves and leap in their career, leap to leadership or start their own business. So that they can be happy, fulfilled, paid their worth, impactful, recognized, and all of that. So that's it. I love it.
Oh, that's a lot to unpack. I have a lot of
Okay.
questions. I think before those, you kind of glossed over a lot of the accolades. Maybe you're a little too humble, but I can say that I know that you started your career as an F-16 flight simulator instructor, and you were actually the first woman in the Air Force, in the Israeli Air Force, to become a commander in charge of training of all F-16 pilots in Israel's in simulator.
Yeah.
Correct?
So that is the very
Can you expand on that a little bit? Because I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, you know what? It was probably the best school I could have asked for. You take 18-year-olds and you throw them in the water, right? And every single
Mhm.
18-year-old gets a different type of pool to swim in, right? But it's
Yeah,
still a freaking pool. And you don't know
yeah,
how to swim and you're trying to figure this out. And for me, it was the F-16 flight simulator instructor. And it was an amazing, amazing thing to learn how to do. I mean, everything about the plane and how to talk to pilots and how to talk to people who are more, experienced than you and how to give feedback and how to plan. It's like there's just so much that you learn that are actually lessons for life. It's like, how do I take, now I know that I need to know my audience in order for the feedback to come along. Like I know so many things that I'm taking with me every single day because of that experience. But I think it's also taught me that even though there was no women before that, and I was really passionate about working really hard and showing that I can do this, and breaking barriers is really tough. Like you're constantly out of your comfort zone and you really don't have a lot of examples to look at. So this is where it becomes tough. But honestly, I realize that if I can break that barrier, if I can break it, the ceiling, it's amazing. And I was also standing on shoulders of giants, right? Like we kept on kind of breaking that ceiling one after the other, and kind of inspiring each other. I was standing on the shoulder of the first woman to ever become an F-16 flight, simulator instructor, right? And then I became the first commander in that squad. And, based on that, Alice Miller also used some of the, information for her court to become the first pilot. So we're every time we're standing on shoulders of giants, and this what helps us push forward. So it was an amazing experience. I'll never forget it, for sure.
I mean, it's amazing. I feel like if you're the first at something, or one of the first, it has to be a certain drive, right? There has to be a passion behind it, because you're like, I'm gonna be the first. Like, I'm gonna prove everyone wrong. Was proving people wrong the motivator, or was it, not an external thing? It was more of an internal, I want to excel at X.
I think it was both, if I'm being really honest. First of all, I knew I was lucky, right? Let's be honest. I mean, I got into something that probably most women in Israel want to, and I somehow got in, right? Maybe I can give some credit to the level of physics that I had, and math and chemistry and all of that. But in general, I was freaking lucky too, right? So to some extent, that gives you the drive to prove yourself, first of all, that you are not chosen wrong. Like, I really want to make it successful. I really want to prove myself there. I really want to be the best version of myself. But then there's like something in your mind that says, well, but why are women not allowed to become commanders? Like, what is that? Like, what is that? What am I missing, that if I close that gap, I will be able to do it? And I think this was a lot about that. Like, how do I close that gap? It was a lot about trust. Let's be honest. It was about, like, can we trust someone who hasn't been, beyond enemy lines and doing all these, like bombing the nuclear plant in Iraq? Can we trust her to actually train our pilots? And I think it's a valid question. But I took it as a challenge to close that gap, to close the trust factor, and to show everybody that the answer is yes. So it was, I guess, a combination.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, I think some of the greatest athletes, intellectuals, creators have built things or succeeded because they wanted to prove other people wrong. Because people told them, no, you can't do that. Or no, that's a stupid idea. And they're like, oh, it is? All right. And they just fucking go to
Right. And
work.
and I think there's always a combination. So, like Simon Sinek says, the why, right? I mean, the why can't be only what other people say. It's just not strong enough in many cases. Like, you eventually need to be driven from the heart and saying, this is what I want, right? Because otherwise, when it becomes hard, this is the first thing that you'll say, well, then I don't care what they say, and I'm going to give up, right? And I think this is one of the things that I see also as founders, right? Like, sometimes they're like so motivated by what, their teacher will see, and like they're, whatever, like what will other naysayers will say about them. But when it's really hard, it's just not motivating enough. So you eventually will need to go back to your heart and say, what do I want? What does Ilana want? And I wanted to feel successful. I wanted to teach, our pilots to defend my country and come home safe. I knew my mission, and I really, really believed in it. So I think it has to be a combination.
Yeah. How long were you in the army for?
Um,
Longer than the usual?
yeah, so I was about 3.5 years because of this. Yeah. So it was
Did you like it?
the best experience in the world. I can't think of any maybe now as a founder, I learned a lot. That was probably another fast school that I had, but I can't think of something that taught me more than than that, in my life. I think it shaped me to who I am. Yeah, it was amazing.
did you actually get to fly in like fighter
Yeah, you get
jets?
to fly a little bit. We don't get to go beyond enemy lines. Like there was very strict rules. By the way, it changed,
Yeah.
right? Now women are allowed to. Like it was very strict in my time. Women were not allowed to become real pilots. There was very strict rules against that, and it was also broken. In the court
But was that to protect
to protect
women
women.
essentially? Because if they were to fall behind enemy
Exactly.
lines, they would go through. Okay. So it wasn't like a bias necessarily against women. I mean, it was,
Hard to
it
say.
wasn't, it wasn't.
It's hard to say,
Yeah.
but I'm glad Ellis Miller, killed that one, and then it opened up. And yeah, I mean, there was no reason really, beyond the fact that it's, we tend to protect women, we tend to protect our kids, even, our girls, a little more than our boys. Don't fall, don't run. So I think it comes from there a little bit. So
Yeah. Yeah. Men tend to go off to war. Men tend to do the dangerous things in society to protect
yeah,
society. And
and I always, I mean, I look at the progress and I love it, but I also look at like how much have we achieved in such a short time. Like it's like we progressed, we changed as society. So you can always look at what can improve, but I also think that we came a really long way. Like like just two generations before that, they barely went to school, right? So heck,
yeah.
I again feel lucky.
Yeah, it's a crazy time to be alive. I sometimes I feel like the technology is moving, both technology and maybe it's correlated with how societal norms are developing, maybe because of the whole social media thing. The kids are, um they're open to much more views. Before, like when I was a kid, I would wait for like, a show to come out. I would wait for like a CD. I remember
Right.
like from America to come, and I would go to the local store. Now everything's open to everyone, everywhere, all the time, at the fastest, and you can't even keep up with the amount of content that comes out. It's
It's
impossible.
amazing and it's immediate, and we're used to this
Very
immediate,
immediate.
pace, and it's good and bad, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like the thrill of waiting for something is kind of gone. I remember literally like I would wait for like a CD for a band that I really liked, and until it would get to the US, and then maybe like 6 months or a year later it would
Right.
finally arrive in Israel, and you would be so happy. You're like, oh, I finally got it, and you go and you would listen to that CD over and over and over and over
I
again.
agree. Yeah.
That's out the window. That does not exist anymore. It's a
Totally.
completely different time for kids nowadays. They almost don't know how. Um, I don't know if spoiled is the right word, but I guess spoiled for content they are. They just have everything at their fingertips all the
All the
time.
time. Yeah, I mean, I see my
Do
kids,
you
right? Yeah, I mean,
your kids like that, or do you try to maybe shield them a little bit from that?
oh, you can't shield them, especially not in COVID. I do try to embed other things. We love traveling the world, for example. Not this year, but in general, we've been to
Yeah,
some pretty crazy places that I think most parents would kind of like, look at me in a weird look. I
yeah,
do believe in showing them that they're lucky, showing them what's on the other side of society, showing them that we have, because we're lucky, we have responsibility to change lives and to change the world and to help others that need it. So I want them to show to see it. I want them to see Ethiopia. I wanted to see Morocco. I wanted to see Burma, Myanmar, right? I wanted to see Indonesia. Like I wanted to see the world and really see how they can impact things. So, I think perspective is really important, especially now, especially when the kids will scroll through TikTok and see only like dancing girls or whatever. And it's like, this is not what life is about. This is what life is about,
yeah,
right? So I think perspective is
yeah,
very important. And I like some challenges, right? I mean, that, physical challenges. So right now I took my she just turned 12 a couple of days ago. And for her bat mitzvah, we did kind of like an 8-peak challenge here in the area. So every time we went to
Oh,
tackle
love it.
another peak. Not saying that it was all easy, not saying that it wasn't, there wasn't
How high?
there was
How high
too
was the
high,
peak?
but there was definitely like, physical challenge. She did go with us to
Amazing.
Kyrgyzstan, which is very high. And that was kind of multi-day trek. So I do believe in pushing yourself from younger age and learning to cope with the, uncomfortable situations. I believe that they help you later on.
Oh, 100%. And I definitely want to touch on the whole mountaineering adventure, travel the world part because because I love that as well. Um, but I just want to talk a little bit more about the army, or maybe not necessarily the army. I wonder, every time I have someone who is Israeli and is in tech as well, I ask them this question, and I ask them, why do you think Israel and Israelis, why do you think Israel is such a tech hub? And why do you think Israelis fit so well into tech roles, especially here in the US?
Mm-hmm. I'll say a few things that I think are important. And I literally talked about it just a few days ago with a friend. First of all, the fact that we have to go to the military opens our eyes to problems that most 18, 20-year-old just never see. And I think it's, first of all, just suddenly like opens some major blinders that you grow up with, and you're suddenly like I said, thrown into a pool, and there's like some problems there, right? And so you're taking these like super energetic high achievers, right? I mean, because everybody's going, right? So this is not about people who, this is like their last chance, right? This is about, people like from all shades of gray, right? That are, throwing into these problems, and they need to find solutions. And, you're forced to put the blinders off. You're forced to deal with some of these things. And suddenly you have these amazing, people who want to suddenly solve problems that most 20-year-olds just will never think of, right? Like, when we barely knew what drones are, we already saw Israelis creating anti-drones because, if there's going to be a lot of drones, they could bomb, a stadium, or they can, bring things into a prison, right? So Israelis were already thinking 5 years or 10 years away, right? And they were thinking about it because of the military, right? Or we would see people, still trying to figure out what is Face ID, right? And on the other hand, Israelis were already creating anti-Face ID because they realized that with your photo, everybody can open your phone, like with a really
Yeah.
good photo. So they were already creating some, bypasses and security around that. So all I'm trying to give examples of how the military was opening our eyes to things that most people were never even thinking of. And I think a lot of the innovation is coming from there. So if I'm, I mean, definitely we see it as a startup, country. Like we're definitely seeing a lot of things coming, from founders in Israel. But I think what's interesting is not necessarily the number as much as the type of problems they're trying to solve. And the type of problems in many cases are just something that most 20-year-olds would just not think about. And I think that's where it becomes really, really interesting. And I think, and then kind of going back to your question, I think this is kind of where people are becoming, like just learning to become innovative, to solve problems as on the go, right? Because you're like tackling them. So you have to think fast, you have to think innovative, you have to think with what you have. And, that together with a bigger understanding of how the world goes and some of the things that, like are interesting in the world, suddenly it becomes, you become a problem solver. You become someone who wants to run fast. You become someone who wants to make things possible. And that's a really amazing things to have, in a tech company. If you want to hire somebody, you want to hire them for hunger, for wanting to achieve more, for wanting to, to make things happen. And I think that's why we're seeing some of that success.
Yeah, when I was in the army, I it's so funny how time makes you see things in a different perspective. I thought I was, I understood the cause, but I thought as far as like my own individual time, I was losing out. I would look at Americans and say like, oh, they're out there in the colleges having a good time, getting drunk, partying, getting a degree. And then by
Right.
21, 22, they're already out there making a lot of money, potentially. And me, I have to wait 21. Then, you go the usual route of traveling. And then by the time you start studying, you're like 24 or so,
Right.
right? Now I look at it completely different. I realize the advantages that the army gives you, and it's not necessarily the best way, because most of the I don't know what the numbers are, but I know that a lot of people that go into college here at 18, what they end up studying is not what they do for life, and it's not something they actually even really wanted to do. Because at 18, let's be honest, you don't know shit. Like, you don't know who you are at 18. You don't know where you're going to be 20
Right.
years from now. And it's, yeah, my perspective is completely shifted on that. And I do think the army has, like, looking back, it was some of the best times I've had. And there's real advantages of putting an 18-year-old in that type of an environment and really cultivating, and it's not 100%. It's not like all the people that had come out of the army, it was the best experience for them. But I think a lot of people it is,
Mhm.
and they do gain a lot personally and professionally.
Right. And I think one thing that we need to take into account is that now, with the way work goes, gone are the days in most cases where people go into a place and be there for 40 years, right? So when that was the case,
So true.
right? When that was the case, people would, if they came in, 5, 10 years before you, they definitely had an advantage, right? What's interesting is now, if you think about it, most roles you don't even study in school, right? You don't really study for sales. You don't really study for marketing. You don't really study for product management. You don't really study for management overall, right? Like, you don't really study for what is it like to be a CEO, right? Like, you don't really study for most of the roles that we see today. So what happens, and I'm talking a little more specific for tech, right? Like, it's different when you're doctors, etc. But if you think about it, now we get into that chicken and egg of, yeah, but you never had this experience, so why would we give you a chance? And and if nobody will give me a chance, how do I get in, etc. And what's interesting, I believe that the military suddenly gives you chances that we've never had before, right? Suddenly, yes, I did manage people, actually, quite a few of them, right? Or yes, I was actually a commander. So, I'm more ready for management than most of the people who just finished, college, even if they finished it 3 years ago, right? So suddenly it prepares you for things that I don't know if we really take it, I mean, suddenly it's like it actually pushes you forward. And I think, one of the, I remember writing an article at some point about why women should travel solo around the world to become better leaders. And there's a lot of things that you learn from being independent, from thinking fast, from solving problems that you never learned in school, right? So, like, and I can go on and on, or just talking to random people and how much you can learn from that. And and I can go on and on. But the fact is that when you don't have this experience and you're going right straight from college to work, whatever, it just doesn't prepare you as much for the real world today. And the real world now just moves fast. So
I'm so glad you brought up traveling, because that's such a great segue to the next thing I want to ask you, which is, and for people who may not know, the usual linear trajectory of people is 18 go to the army, finish around 21 on average, and then work for about a year or so, and then they tend to do this big trip post army. And the I guess the two big places that people tend to go are South America and India.
right.
And it's somewhere between 6 months to a year. Some people go to the US or Australia for work, but that's
It's
generally
so true. It's so true.
that's the shtick. So when you finish your 3.5 years, what did you do? Where did you go? How does that
So
look?
basically what you said. But I didn't work because I was a commander. I did get a little bit of salary from the military. So I did go right away to Thailand, India, Nepal. That was kind of my trip. I think it was around
By yourself?
I went by myself. I think it was one of the most. So I knew I going to meet there some people that were in the Air Force with me. So I knew I going to meet them for a little bit, but it was mostly on my own. I think my dad actually freaked out about understanding that I'm going to land in India on my own, and he actually came to visit me for 10 days to see that I'm okay.
Oh, that's nice.
And that was really
That's nice.
fun. But then, I continued on my own, and it was an amazing experience. I think we're not used to being on our own, and it's intimidating in first, and it's scary to some degree. And sometimes you need to cope with things like, I was sick as a dog, and you need to like figure it out, right? And that's okay. I think that's how you grow. And that's how you become more independent on yourself and trusting yourself more, and realizing that you're in charge. You need to take decisions. You need to make it work. And so first of all, yeah, so that was about 4.5 months. Like in that case, it was relatively shorter. I did want to go right away to the Technion. I was already scheduled to start in September or October. I don't remember what the days are, but I was already scheduled to start. So I knew I need to come back for that. And yeah, and so it was short. But right after the Technion, I went again for another 5 months in South America. So exactly what you said. This was on my own as well. And again, met some amazing people. And then I went with my husband around, then he became my husband, my boyfriend, that then became my husband for a year. So I'm definitely big on traveling. So that's a big piece of me. Yeah.
You met him in South America?
No, so I met him in the Technion,
Okay.
and we decided to go on a trip around the world. I quit Intel, and we decided to, and he quit his tech company or the tech company that he was in, and we went on a trip around the world. We actually decided to hike and bike around Australia and New Zealand. That was part of it, so it was an amazing experience.
Well, okay, that's a lot. I have a lot of questions. All right. So I guess firstly, how long and what were you doing at Intel?
So in Intel, I was, engineering. So I studied electric engineering. What's beautiful is because of the military, actually, speaking of benefits of the military, I was actually taken by Intel on the very first semester. So I didn't even know what computers are, really. I think they took me just so that nobody else would take me, because I don't think I had a lot of benefit at that point. But they molded me, like they shaped me. And I had some bad bosses, but I had two remarkable bosses. And they are the one that shaped me to who I become. Ziad Khana, Johnny Saruji. Ziad Khana is an executive in Cadence today, like super high up, super successful, making a huge change in the Arab community. Johnny Saruji's number 2 in Apple. Like they're like amazing people, and just learning from that caliber of people and having them trust me and give me a chance was just huge. So yeah, I'm I'm giving a lot of a lot of this to them because they helped me as a student when I really needed, somebody to hold on to. Um, yeah, but then I was basically engineering. So I was coding a lot. But what was interesting is at some point I needed to deploy whatever our product was to our internal customers. And those internal customers are either other groups of Intel or people like HP or whatever, right? This is kind of where Intel products go. And I loved it. I fell in love with working with people. I fell in love with bringing that, tech understanding and working really fast, but also trying to solve real time problems of what the customers have and like coding it right on the spot and seeing how it's like solve the problem. And I just felt like a rock star, and I knew that this is where I need to belong. And honestly, at that point, I focused less and less on school, unfortunately. And my grades showed that, but honestly, nobody cared. Like ever, at that point, I was already like 4 years in Intel. Nobody ever looked at my grades, which is kind of interesting. But I did know that after the trip around the world that we did, I want to go back, and I want to find something in customer oriented. So that was my first leap, I guess.
Oh, so do you miss this now a little bit? Because I guess this year it's been more more Zoom, more screens, less maybe face to face time with people.
A little less face to face, although Zoom feels like pretty one-on-one to me, or pretty like,
Yeah,
like some people are like I've actually never seen in real life, and I actually like feel like I really know them. So
yeah,
no, I think I'm good. Like I missed some traveling and obviously like a hug from time to time, but I feel that it was really effective and really efficient for me, especially starting a business. So I have to say, it worked really well for me. If I need to
yeah.
be a bit
We're we're
selfish.
we're lucky COVID didn't happen 20 years ago. I don't know what we would have
Oh,
done.
no.
It would not have been
Yeah.
good. So you leave Intel and then you just decide to go travel the world with your then
Yeah, so
boyfriend,
I
right?
traveled twice. So once I took a break from Intel for 4 months or 5 months, and I went to South America on my own, and then I came back. I met my boyfriend, and basically when I met him, he said, but I'm on the way out, so you're either coming or not. And I basically said yes.
Yes,
So,
do it.
I'm pretty spontaneous in that sense. Yeah, and we went. So that was great.
Do you look at I guess do you look at travel as vacation, or do you look at it as partially an immersive learning experience that you go
It's
through?
a great question. I think a lot of it is the length. I think the up to maybe 2 weeks, you
Hmm.
can't immerse. Like it's just more. Maybe you can, but it's a little more like I want to tick some boxes. I want to see this and this and this. And I feel that when you're in that attitude anyway, you're looking at it in a different way. Now, granted, I think we're a family that really does immerse. So even if we travel for, a few weeks in Ethiopia or Burma, we sleep, with the locals. We sleep in the villages. Sometimes it's on the floor. Sometimes it's like, so we rough it out. So I
How do your kids like that? Do they like it?
sometimes
Like, mom, this again?
Yes, so they
I don't
think
want to
I'm
sleep on the floor.
crazy. They definitely think
Yeah.
I'm crazy. I think that this is what they're going to remember for life, but they also say that it was one of the hardest things they've ever done. So, but again, I think that seeing these countries from a five-star hotel just doesn't cut it. In India, it's nice to see the hotels just because it shows you the gap, between what's the reality and, like some of the parts of society. But I think you need to have a combination of, what is the real life there and how do you immerse yourself there? And then on the other hand, you know, um, you need a combination. So I'm not saying that we rough it up the entire thing, but we definitely try to immerse ourselves. But then when it's longer, you have the benefit of almost living in certain places for a longer time. And we literally we would go to the supermarket and we would buy groceries and we would talk to the locals. And, at that point, you kind of feel like you're a local for a little bit. And I think it's amazing.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I feel like there's a couple of ways I guess you can do anything, right? You can just go to the gym and maybe work out a little bit, or you can go to the gym and really understand how to be better at that thing. You can just go on a vacation, or you can really go and experience the culture and the food and learn more about the people. And it's true for
It's
everything,
true for
right?
everything.
And
Yeah.
and travel is I feel like one of the most important. things that you can do in life. It's just it takes you out of that little box, especially if you're in a small country. If you live in a small country, it's just for me. It's been one of the best things and
It's an
most eye
eye-opener.
opening.
It's an eye-opener.
Yeah,
And like you said, especially when you come from Israel, it's, an 8 million people country that, you can drive through it in, half an hour one way and, 5 hours, the second way. It's small,
8 hours.
whatever,
Yeah,
right? It's tiny, right?
it is.
Yeah. So if you think about that, you have to open the blinders, you have to get away, you have to see other cultures. But it's true for the US as well. There's a lot of Americans that never left the country, never seen any, language that is not, English. And I think it's interesting to see how other people live, how other people interact, costumes, like food. There's just so much to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess at what point did you start to get into mountaineering?
If anything, mountaineering is probably the thing that I learned that I'm not good at, but I'll go there. So, I love mountains. I always
It's a work in
right?
progress.
I love pushing myself. I love the view. So give me, snowy peaks and stuff. I'm like, that's it. I just feel like I'm in a dream. Maybe it's because in Israel we don't have it. I don't know, but put me on a peak like this, and I feel like most alive ever. Um, so um so at some point I just and I realize that I'm strong and I'm determined, mostly. Like, it's just something that I have the grit, which is a lot of what you need. um but so I did do a bunch of a few peaks. I did a few the bigger treks in Nepal, which are pretty standard, like Annapurna and Everest Base Camp and stuff like that. And that's kind of, I think, what piqued my interest. If anything, I try to go to the Mont Blanc. We actually didn't make it because of weather conditions. But then I did do some peaks in South America and stuff like that. So it's definitely like something that, I wanted to pursue more. But then I took some more advanced mountaineering things, like in Argentina and Chile, like with two ice axes. And honestly,
Yeah,
I sucked at it. Let's call it the word, I sucked at it. I could barely get the ice out
hard.
of it. I was just too weak. And I wasn't as good in like rock climbing. So I realized that I can get to a certain level and just enjoy it. I'm not gonna pursue it, even though initially I thought that maybe this is gonna be my life. It's not.
Yeah,
But I do still have. So before COVID, we actually had a plan to fly with my he was 13 at that time, my son, to fly to climb Kilimanjaro for his bar mitzvah. So that was,
that's a fairly easy one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm still hoping to do it, but maybe I'll wait for COVID to to flesh out of that area a little bit.
What's the hardest one you've climbed? Hardest mountain?
I think probably Hawaii Potosi. There's a mountain that is 6,100 meters, so that would be around 21,000 feet. In Burma, in sorry, Bolivia. And I think it was a combination of I wasn't ready for it, honestly. Yeah, but it was awesome. Mount Whitney here is awesome. It's beautiful. I think my only mistake is that I decided to do it in one day versus 2, 3, like most people. So I do some crazy things from time to time, and then it becomes hard. But that's okay.
Yeah, you should try. I don't know if you've done Rainier, but Rainier is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I haven't done that yet. Okay, well, on the
A
list.
lot of fun.
On the list.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you deal with because here in the US, I think the highest is maybe almost 15, which is Whitney. And,
Yeah, it's not too high.
once
Yeah.
you go to, yeah, and once you go to South America, it starts to be around 20,
Right.
21. And obviously the highest are in Asia. But how do you deal with altitude?
I'm Relatively good if I take my time and I take my breaks. And so I'm pretty good with that. My husband, not so well. So we have this
No.
thing that we think that the more muscle you have, the less you can acclimatize. I don't know if that's true, but he's definitely stronger than I am. So I don't know if that's true. It might be something genetic. But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty okay with that as long as I listen to my body and I give myself time. But I also just get really excited. Actually, I don't know if you have time, but I have like a really short story around it. So,
I have plenty of
okay.
time.
So, short story, which was kind of interesting. So, when we were actually back to the military and we were in the Air Force, we actually went through an exercise that mimics what happens when you're like at 10,000 meters. And if suddenly like you're on a plane and you don't have oxygen, basically the idea is like, how can you tell that something is wrong with the oxygen before you faint? So what they do is they take us to a room, a very special room. They take the oxygen out of the room. We all sit there and they give us like mazes, like just like little mazes, like kids, to draw through. And you need to kind of listen to yourself and think, what am I feeling, so that you'll remember that when there's going to be no oxygen in real life, right? So, and they literally like mimic 10,000 meters, and which is very high. It basically means that you're going to faint within, a minute or two, right? So you basically go through those mazes. And what was interesting is the very first thing that I remember is that I feel amazing. Like I have this amazing rush of energy. And I think, by the way, that I'm kick ass, that I'm acing the damn thing. Like, give me another maze. Like, let me like show everybody that I'm solid. And I do get a little bit of tingling in my hands, and that's it. And then I faint. It's really interesting. So what was interesting is that I didn't know that this would be a lesson for life, right? I mean, we kind of looked at it as, an adventure. We're like 1920, right? We looked at it as an adventure. And here I am in Nepal and I'm sleeping and I'm totally like excited and I'm happy. Like, this is amazing. This is amazing. I feel great. And at night, I feel these tingling in my hands. And I'm like, wait, am I sitting? Am I sleeping on it? What's going on? And then it took me back and I was like, oh my God, like this is my way of knowing that I'm not acclimatizing. And I need a break.
Were you fearful that you were going to faint?
I think that I wasn't that scared, but I knew like everybody wanted to continue the next day, continue up. And I basically woke up and said, I'm not moving. We're going to do an acclimatization here a day. And I don't think that I would have had this way of thinking if I didn't have that experience. So it was interesting. It was like, it just taught me something for life. It was amazing.
That's amazing. So you feel like euphoric.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, I'm the shit. I'm
Yeah.
this, I'm that, and then you go to sleep.
Yeah, and it's amazing, and you need to know that, and and it
Wow.
happened to me
Yeah.
again in Huayna So I knew that this is my sign. Some people like their head hurts. Some people have nausea. Like everybody has something else. For me, it was that, and it was just not knowing it. Like it's really really important. It's like I don't even know why not everybody goes through this. It's like so important for me.
For you, it's almost like it's almost like counterintuitive, because when you feel great, you're like, this is easy. I can do
Yeah.
this. But it's essentially your body
Oh,
telling you the
and I
opposite.
didn't tell you what my mazes look like. They look like crap. So I had absolutely no clue what I'm doing. I just thought I do, which is
Yeah.
amazing because that's the most dangerous kind, right? Because you think you're okay. You think you can go on. You think that your decisions are good and they're actually not, right? So
Yeah.
it's actually a pretty dangerous thing to know. And it's great to know it, right? So just,
Very dangerous.
yeah, but knowing it is,
I I remember when I took a diving course, and you get to 30 meters, which is when you get your, I think it was
yeah,
the one
two
star.
star.
And 2 star? Okay, yeah. 2 star. It was like a
I
decade ago.
know.
I don't remember it well. But I do remember, however, that they told us like you can have that euphoric
Yeah.
feeling like almost like you're on LSD or
Yeah.
something. And I had that feeling like I got to about 28 meters, and all the shapes and the colors started to shift and move, and I was like, okay, this isn't good. This is not good. And I started going up, to lower the thing, and I started to get more oxygen in my brain, and I felt better. But there were like a good 20-30 seconds where I was like,
Yeah.
euphoric, like you explained. I was like, okay, this is not good. I was aware of, it's not like I was completely out of it. I was aware of this isn't reality, but like I couldn't get my eyes not to see it.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah.
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 It was very weird.
So I love scuba diving. So yeah, I hear you. Haven't done that in
Yeah.
ages though. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I for some reason, my two biggest, I guess I have to say fears, but my two biggest fears are like underwater stuff, right? And that's why I wanted to do the scuba diving, because I wanted to address that fear,
Nice.
and public speaking in front of a crowd.
Wow.
Those are my two
And you
biggest
have a
things.
freaking podcast. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, this is when it's one on one, I love it. Like I really, really enjoy, 99.9 of percent of the conversations I've had with people so far. And but if you put me, just as an example, I had to go. I tried Clubhouse a few times. Not the biggest fan of the platform, but it's an interesting like
Mhm.
experience. And I had to go. Someone like kind of like pinged me up to go speak, and the room must have had like 300 people. My hands were shaking. My voice was cracking. Like I did not do well. And this is just, this isn't even like essentially an audience where I can see it, but it's still a live audience.
Right.
And I did bad. I did really bad.
That's amazing. But there's an audience here too, right? It's just like you don't see it. I think that's the difference.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's one of the tricks. I mean, honestly, a lot of people are afraid of public speaking. I still get excited every single time, and nervous. And I would say to people, don't kill that, because I think that's what makes you a better speaker, a more authentic speaker, a more excited speaker, like that, that's part of it. If you get used to it, you become boring, right? So I think there's also something amazing about it. But there is, part of it is like also talking to somebody specific, like that is nodding, right? I mean, like you do these tricks anyway when you're a public speaker. So,
Are there like tricks that you've cultivated, because everything's a learning experience,
oh
right?
yeah.
Like perhaps from going from like, your first public speaking engagement to now, have there been things that you've cultivated along the way that have made it like easier, better, for you
All
to
the
communicate better with the crowd, etc.?
all the time, and it keeps getting better, right? I mean, it's a never ending, there's no end, like end mark, right, when you get there.
Yeah.
um I think there's a lot of things. First of all, in terms of topics, I felt like it was always supposed to be very informative, but people are not necessarily looking for information, they're looking for transformation. And that's really important to think, right? Because it's like information they have on YouTube, they have in other places, they have in books, but they're here because they want to feel some transformation, right? And they want to go through something. And that's one thing that kind of, impacted the way I choose the topics, what I choose to talk about, and I'll get to that. Some of it is really around, like what people say, like people will remember the way you made them feel, not your exact words, and it's so true, because if you inspire people, if you motivate people, if you make them think, if they make them feel, that's what's going to drive them into you. And the hardest thing is that we're fighting this thing, right? Like if you're going to be boring within 2 minutes, people are like this, right? And there's nothing more
On the phone.
depressing than speaking in front of people and seeing them with their phones on. It just takes all the energy away. Like it deflates you instantly. And one of the things that I realize is, first of all, people are really driven by stories of failure. as much as it sounds like, I'll step on the stage and I'll tell them how kick-ass I am, that's not really going to make the difference. What they really want to hear is about the tough moments along the journey. And that's what's going to inspire them. That's what's going to move the needle for them. And I think it took me some time and some maturity of my own to realize that, the very first story that I want to share is actually a hard story, right? To get them to connect with me, to get them to listen, to get them to see that me in a different light, to see that I'm authentic, is that I'm not going to BS them. And that's the very first thing, because you really have like 5 minutes to capture them at most, right? Some people will say a few seconds, but in general, like, you have just a few minutes, otherwise you lose them. So that's one thing, and that changed the way I choose the topics and how I create my keynote or whatever. I think then it's really about, I call it the confidence pyramid. So it's really like, it starts with, being really sure about where you want to go, right? Really, like really knowing, where you want to go, what you want to say, really practicing it, like, competency, and then core, right? There's a lot in terms of how you stand, how you dress, how you talk, your language, your tone, your everything around it.
Body language.
Yeah, and a lot of it can in the beginning can be fake, right? Like, even if I'm trembling inside and I feel like I get a heart attack, I'll still fake the first 2 minutes, and I'll know them by heart, because I know the first 2 minutes. If I don't know them by heart, I can get whacked, right? But after that, you just kind of go into your flow. So there's a lot of tricks around it that I teach a lot, but yeah, I do believe that public speaking is probably the number one thing that moved the needle for me in terms of my career. My confidence, my career, my visibility, the way people treat me. So I think it really moved the needle for me. And this is something that I do a lot with our executives today.
Yeah. I would literally rather swim with sharks.
Oh my God, that is funny.
um, but it's so true what you said about, because information is endless. It's everywhere nowadays, to the point almost where I think at some point a lot of institutions are going to go away, because there's just so much really solid, good education out there that's for free. But the transformation part is so true. I remember I went to a some conference. It was like a tech conference back in New York, like 4 or 5 years ago. And I was listening to all these different speakers come up, and they were okay, nothing like amazing. And I just kind of listened to them. And I always make a point not to go on my phone when I'm listening to someone, because I feel like that's so disrespectful. I try to think, like, if I was in their shoes, I would not like that.
Mhm.
And I try not to do that ever. And and then this one guy comes on, Steve. I forget his last name, but he's an investor in a company. I think they're in New York. He just blew everyone away. He got everyone so excited after his 20-minute talk. I remember I had like goosebumps all over. I was like hitting my friend on the chest. I was like, dude, are you listening to this? I left the room with so much energy, and I was like, that's amazing. That's a gift. Like, that's a capability to have, to get people so excited. So that transformation thing that you said is so true. Yeah.
And it's like you said, there's information everywhere. I mean, how many books do we have about, I don't know, weight loss or sports or healthy eating or whatever, or travel, whatever, right? And then it's really, we don't necessarily do it, right? It's really about, like, how do you actually take action? How do you get people to move, right? And to move their needle? And it's a different thing. So it really is about transformation, and that's what gets results eventually.
Yeah. Do you have another like 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Yeah. All right, cool. Yeah, I feel like self-help is the biggest, which is, it's very broad, but that's like the biggest category in books, in videos. If you go to
Oh
YouTube, if you go to
yeah.
it's endless, right? Relationships, finance, Bitcoin, everyone's a guru now. And I'll be honest. I think Naval said this. I heard him say this, Naval Ravikant, and I was like, this is so true. He was like, there are, let's say, talk about, I don't know, weight loss, right? There are about 5 gajillion different weight loss and diet books. There's only maybe 20 or 30 or 50 that are really, really good and have the information, right? Because we're not doing all the 50 different gajillion workouts that they're telling us to do. There's a handful of them. So he was like, I'm not trying to read all the books. I'm trying to read the best, like 50 books over and over again and really immerse myself in that information.
Right.
And nowadays, because of, I've seen this on I'm sure you've seen this as well on Clubhouse, on Twitter, on YouTube, the amount of quote unquote fake gurus, right, that are trying to sell us information and to get their ebooks and to get us in their conferences. And that's one of the things I hate the most. And they're not really successful people. It's not people like yourselves, right, that have built things, sold things. Their whole thing is success is around you buying their product that they're selling you success as the product. And it's this loop that's it fires me up like nothing else. It really annoys the shit out of me.
Well, I have to say that one of the reasons that I went into this, I mean, when I was basically, let's be honest, the bottom of my barrel, like I was deep, after some major failures. And, it felt like deep underwater, if anything, right? And, and I was trying to see how I can get help because to some extent I was not very good at asking for help. I was always kind of the tough woman who could try to figure things out on her own. And when I was looking for help, I found two types, right? I found, coaches that honestly at that point I didn't have any respect. Sorry if anybody there is a coach. I had no respect to coaches because most of them have never walked the walk. They talk the talk and and I'm like, what have you done that inspires me to learn from you? And that was my biggest.
I'll teach you how to make seven figures.
Well,
have you made 7 figures?
Made 7 figures, and it was painful. And the other thing, it was, or the motivators that were like, whoo, 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 you can do it. And I'm like, that speaks to some people. I don't, disagree. It was just not going to move my needle because I know that I can be motivated if I know what to do, but I'm lost. And I think this is where I realized that this is a freaking big problem. There's a lot of people who are lost today. There are a lot of people who feel stuck. There are a lot of people in toxic environments and they don't know how to get out of it. And what happens is your confidence gets hurt and then you can't sleep at night. And then you wake up, you're half shaped of yourself and you're a half version of yourself and you take it out on everyone and your health deteriorates and you can't sleep at night. And then you really can't land anything. It's like, it's literally like a downhill spiral and it's major. And I literally made a promise that if I ever get out of this crap, I have to tell the world how, because it's just, it hurts. And, and to me, there's like, when I realized there's actually a really scripted way of getting out of it, I was like, why do we not teach this in school? Like, why do my kids not learn this? Right? Why do we not teach it in college? Because honestly, I think for future of work, the most important skill is going to be how to reinvent yourself and leap again and again and again, because we're going to do it every year and a half. We're going to change course. We're going to try different functions. We're going to try different industries. We're going to try different things. So why are we not teaching this? So although I still don't necessarily like to be called a coach, I still like.
It has a bad connotation sometimes.
Because it's a lot of times it's people who learned to coach. And I'm like, no, this is about experience. This is about walking the freaking walk again and again and again and banging on my head and failing again and again and taking all that know-how to teach others to get the courage to step forward and to, get clear of what they want to do next and tell their story and build a reputation and build a network and leap, right? So it's really about the strategic and the transformation and to hold their hand and to mentor them and to support them 1,000%, right? So,
yeah. The problem is they'll use such generic terms. I'll see on bios like #1 selling transformational book, #1 in sales. on what charts, what sales, what metrics are like. It's all fake. It's all, you can put these things, and it'll be host of, I don't know, one of the most successful podcast. It's just like such all these generic terms thrown around where we can't really
Measure.
measure it. And I look, I understand, man. Like people want to make money, and you could, even if if I'm a little bit naive, I would even say maybe these people actually want to help people, which, the reality is they don't. But let's say they do. Like, I understand, but it just, there's so much inauthenticity about it. And it's all this fake inspiration that's really popular right now.
Yeah, I
And
agree. But I would
it's,
say
yeah,
also
I don't
to
know.
people, like, I would, encourage you to look maybe not at them, but people who do inspire you. And I would
Exactly.
say, look at what they are doing right, right? Because if you're looking at them, they're doing something right. What is that? Like, how do they maintain their name brand? How do they, push forward? What was their career like? What decisions did they make along the journey? It's like, and a lot of it is the consistency, like at first they probably posted something and, got 2 likes at most, right? And suddenly now they have thousands of followers. And that's okay. That's how you start, right? Kind of how we start, talked about in the beginning. And so I would really encourage people to do follow people that inspire you, because you can learn a lot from just looking at what they're doing, how they're posting, what they're saying. And again, not everybody will, take your hand and help you, but just by looking at them, you can learn a lot. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just don't fall, because I've seen people, literally I've seen some of these guys, and I'm not going to name names, on Clubhouse, on YouTube, on the different platforms, and they're taking a lot of money from a lot of people, and they're not really helping them. And these people are paying 5, 10, $20,000, and at the end they're not really getting results. So all I urge you is, before you, because I think mentors are super important. I think there's always going to be someone that knows more than you, especially if you're kind of like up and coming. But just do the research. Like, look, okay, if let's say I'm interested in, I don't know, building a startup, if I'm going to learn from someone, like, look at their, did they start companies? Did they sell companies? Are they in that sphere of that you're interested in? Just do research instead of listening to people who are really good marketers and
I
sell
agree.
the.
That's super important. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
learn everything about them and see if that inspires you, and have they done this before? And I think beyond that, like, is that, are they trying to give you band-aids, or they're really trying to create a transformation and mentorship, and, like, what are they trying to do? Yeah. So, I mean, and again, coaching can be expensive. So, I mean, today I pay my coaches around $100,000 a year. But you know what?
Salary.
No, no, I have my own coach,
Oh, okay.
and they charge $100,000 a year. But you know what? They teach you how to build a business like mine to 8 figures. So if I want to learn it from somebody, I need to learn from somebody who has done it and they've done it. Right.
Yeah.
And it's worth it for me, because otherwise I'll get stuck in, $1 million, and I won't know how to grow. And even $1 million, I mean, most coaches don't make even $40,000, right? And I make it probably in a day
Yeah.
sometimes. So it's really not that. It's really like, how do I learn from people who really inspire me, who have really done it? Like, do your homework, figure it out, like, learn from, their clients, like, really do the homework to make sure that you're in the right hands for yourself, and that it's according to what you want to learn, right? Because if you want to learn public speaking, it's going to be one kind. And if you want to learn how to create an online course, it's one kind. If you want to learn how to start a business, it's a different thing, right? So kind of do your homework, because it's important. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you think it's worth paying 100,000 a year, to someone, even though that they are credited and they have actually built those 8 or 9 figure companies,
It's
and they've
all
sold them,
return
and
on
they're
investment. So it's all return on
yeah.
investment. If they can bring me, the biggest cost in your life is your money, the money that you're not making, period.
Mm.
Okay. So if they can teach me how to make $1 million a month, then they're worth it. If they can't, and I'm not there, I'm not in $1 million a month. So I have something to learn from them, period.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's very interesting.
so that's how I look at it. And to be honest, I don't know any investment in my life that has been more worth it than, these, specific coaches that I took along the journey.
Wow, that's amazing. Earlier you talked a little bit about you were at your lowest, and I wonder if it, because I heard the story that you were talking about on one of the podcasts, where essentially I think you and your company raised capital, and simultaneously you were kicked off the company on the same day. Is that story?
Yeah, it is that story. It's one of the many stories. I have a lot of stories of failure, unfortunately. I feel like I
Could you tell that one?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, at that point, I was vice president of, a company that I literally built from, like literally starting the operations in the US all the way. I kind of mentioned it to like 15 million yearly revenue in the US. We had 5 sites. I was like, it was an amazing role. But then a friend of mine came to me, and somebody that I knew for years, and he basically said, "Hey, I would love to start a startup, and I want you to be my co-founder. What do you say?" And the more I thought about it, the more I was just like, "Heck, like there's nothing I want more. Like I can bring all this thing that I'm working my ass off anyway, and now it's going to be on something that is mine." And that's a huge difference. And I loved the idea. And, every awake hour that I wasn't on the other company, I was working on this. Like I worked on it all day and night. And yeah, and eventually, they, we moved so fast because we were such a good team in general that we were both very driven, very high achievers. We pushed through. It was time to raise money. I had a lot of connections. He had a lot of connections. So we raised it really fast. We raised, $800,000. They were evaluating our small baby at, almost $5 million, which was amazing. Yeah. And I was like, it was amazing because it was, also not from one small investors. It was like 3 big investments in the Silicon Valley. It was like really amazing. And, during the goodbye party from the job that I had, obviously I left to do full time the startup. And during the goodbye party, I told everybody about the company. I was so excited about the startup and, what we're building and how excited I am and how we raise capital and, et cetera. And, and I come back home and we meet and he basically says that I'm out of the company. And, and I'm like, within 24 hours, from thinking that I'm living the dream, I suddenly found myself was like, no job, no salary, no startup, no investment. And, like I say, the worst of all was my ego was down the drain. It was just like, how do I even get up in the morning? How do I face all these people that I told them about the startup? How do I face myself? How do I face my family? What do I do? Do I go back to beg for my job? I could, like, they would they would take me, but there was a reason why I left. Like, clearly my heart is not there anymore. So what do I do next? Like, do I find a co-founder? Do I start a business? Do I look for a job? And that's when the downhill spiral started. Like I, felt like a failure. I couldn't sleep at night. I took it out on everyone around me. I was kind of a mess, I have to say.
Yeah. Did he tell you why? Did he give you a reason?
Yeah, he thought that he can do it on his own. The good news, it never took off. So I got my little revenge there. But yeah,
revenge is
he
sweet.
didn't, suddenly when you see the money and you realize that you're giving away 50% of it, it hurts.
Yeah.
And,
Wow.
so he got greedy.
That's
But,
that's disgusting.
and one of the things that people forget is, 100% of a golden nugget is a golden nugget. It's going to still be zero. Like you are here for the long journey. You're here for, it's going to take time. It's going to take 8 years, 10 years. Like we talked in the beginning, pad yourself with the most successful people you can, the most driven people you can. And that's what I help founders do now, right? Because when you do that, that's when you really it doesn't matter that you have a smaller piece of the pie because your pie is bigger. It's like it
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
exactly.
But he
Yeah.
got greedy, and yeah, so it was unfortunate. But I think again, I know it's all for the best. It's one of those things that I learned so much from it. And then I could start my own company and I could get it acquired and I could, start investing. And like in retrospect, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But, it took me time to realize that.
Do you think letting you go, because I know Silicon Valley, it's a very small place. Rumors go around very quickly when things happen. Like, could it be that him letting you go, maybe he got like a bad reputation, or people, you know what I mean? Like something along those lines where,
So,
once that is out.
yeah. So first of all, I didn't
Yeah.
really reveal it. Maybe I should have. I think I was a
Right.
little too good to him, actually.
Yeah, that doesn't look good.
Yeah, I was very loyal to the startup and to the idea. I really believed in it. So I actually reached out, and that was a mistake on my side. So I literally reached out to these investors and told them that I decided to step away, so that they will continue the investment cycle. And I think in retrospect, that was a mistake on my side. I just didn't want to hurt the company. Maybe I was too loyal.
Yeah.
But I think, it's like water under the bridge. I try to not kill his reputation. He knows, like when he listens to it, he knows that it's him, but I try not to reveal the name. I'm not a believer in trashing people. I believe in like high energy. Everybody's like helping everybody. That's what I love what I'm doing. I love changing lives. I love connecting amazing people together. Like, I don't want to like, melt down over something. And I think, again, in retrospect, it just was the best lesson that I could have. And I think that's the basis of CareerLeap and what I do now. So it's like, in retrospect, that's just what made it me, more successful. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, Well, I feel like you said, and we've said this a couple of times, sometimes the unfortunate things that happen are just learning experiences. There are opportunities for us to grow. There are opportunities to us. All right, maybe I shouldn't have done that the way I did that. Maybe I shouldn't have trusted that person. Maybe I should have built. There's just so many things that, in hindsight, you're like, okay, now I know this, and perhaps I needed to go through that just in order to grow in that
You
incremental
know what?
way.
I think it's most of the cases. Like, I can't say
Yeah,
absolutely all, but I think most of the cases is like that. So, I look at it totally different. I look at it as building a muscle that I will use later on. And just like you go to the gym, you're going to go one time and you're going to suck at it and you won't even know like how to use the machines, right? And you're going to look awkward. But if you do it for a while, you build some certain, muscle. And I think it's exactly the same. Like when you go through something that is hard, you actually build a muscle of perseverance or of grit or of like, being uncomfortable, whatever. It's like it's a muscle that then you're going to use it for other things. And I think that's what's beautiful about it. And I'm using that muscle of trying to figure out what's next to now help, hundreds of people do the same. So it's like it's exactly it. So
yeah. I mean, I feel like not taking rejection, and this is something just personally that I've learned, not taking rejection personally is almost like a superpower, because I've had a couple of companies that I've started, and I've reached out to hundreds of VCs and I've gotten plenty of rejection. And even now when I do the podcast, I reach out to guests, and sometimes guests are like, no thank you, this isn't the right time. And instead of taking it personally, because some of these people are people that I follow on social media, I've been consuming their things for a long time, and you almost feel like you have a bond, right? And but you don't really. It's
right,
a one-way bond
right.
with them. And then they're like, "No, I'm not interested in you." You're like, "Oh, that kind of sucks," but I don't take it personally. I shake it off, and I email. Almost always, I'll just email back and say, "No worries, I'll reach out. In 6 months, maybe then." And it's just you just have to learn to persevere and not take things
Yeah.
personally, because 99% of the time it's not
I
personal.
totally agree. I'm gonna totally tap into that because I think one of the things that I did as a founder as a mistake is when investors didn't get back to me. I thought, it was personal. And I was like really insulted by that. I was like, how can you not get back to me?
Yeah.
Please, at least say that you're not interested. Like, just be, human. And, suddenly when I was on the other side, I realized they're getting hundreds of emails a day. They don't even know how to respond. Like, they can't even say no because they didn't even bother to read. And it's not because they don't want to read, it's because they're inundated. And if I didn't find a warm intro and I didn't find a really interesting way to get their attention, it's on me. But I didn't know that, So I think sometimes you take it personally, but it's not personal at all. It's just either it's really not the right time or whatever. And sometimes people are haters, let's be honest. I'm getting some pretty violent crap on sometimes on my ads or on social media and stuff like that. And that's okay, because they had something probably rough in their life that causes them to be such haters. And I don't want to have whatever that crap is. I don't want to have that. And I'm lucky that I don't have that situation, whatever it is that causes me to be, such a, and sorry, asshole to people, So, to some extent, the way I like to deal with it is like kind of almost pay attention to it a little bit. Sometimes we try to like knock it off. And when we knock it off, it actually comes spiking at night and you're like cursing at night, so sometimes I literally just kind of like, okay, that hurt. Where does it hurt? Let me think about it for a second. Okay. It's like, it's in my throat and it's in my belly and I'm a little insulted by this, but that's okay. They don't have my life and they can't travel the world and they don't live in this mansion and that's okay. So I forgive them and I'm going to brush it off. Right. So you're like, I will give it a little bit of attention. And usually it's like a puppy, like you give it a little attention and it goes away. It's like that,
Yeah.
and it just
Yeah.
works. So I try. But again, I also think that, getting a thicker skin is a muscle too. Right. It's a muscle. And I don't always have the thickest skin that I want to have, but maybe that's what makes me also caring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the problem is that one insult cancels out 99 compliments, and
Amazing.
you'll have that's the problem because if just again, very very tiny example, but like I have I don't even know, not too many, but let's say 40 or 50 comments on my podcast reviews on Apple iTunes, and all of them are positive, and then one was negative. And I kind of sat on that one for a little bit, reading it. And the guy was like, I don't come here for politics, so don't do politics. I was like,
Then
well,
come.
don't listen. Like, there's like a million other
Right.
podcasts. Like the fact that you're trying to tell me what I should be
Right.
interested in, a stranger is telling me, look, you should be interested in A, B, C, D, and I want you to dictate the podcast and A. Are you
Right.
insane? Like, what are you talking about? And look, I get like if you're a fan of the show, right? I understand giving feedback. That's fine. Feedback is one thing. Telling someone how to do something is a
I
completely
agree.
different thing. If you were to say it in a way that's like, look, I love the show. I prefer these things. There's just people think they are entitled to say whatever they want, and they forget that there's a way to. You can say that, but there's a
Say it
way to say
nicer
it.
or maybe write you privately or whatever. Like there's ways to do it nicer. Not everybody's aware of it and they don't have, just they don't navigate to it. The other thing is, like you said, sometimes we're just going to have to brush it off. I had people that came to my free webinar and told me that they didn't like that at the end I'm inviting them to join. I'm like, you don't have to be in my freaking free webinar. Like I just gave you 45 minutes of ton of value for free.
Yeah.
So say freaking
Yeah.
thank you and shut up. Like if you're not happy, you can drop. You didn't pay for it, you didn't do anything, right? So that was like, but that's okay. I remember the first time that somebody unsubscribed from my email list, and I was probably like 20 people at that time. And I was like, somebody unsubscribed. That's like, why did they unsubscribe? And I was checking them out, and I was like, should I write them something? And at some point, and like now I'm in the thousands, and I'm like, if somebody unsubscribed, it's because they're not my audience. That's okay. Like, I don't give a damn, right? So I think to some extent you just grow. And there's always going to be the naysayers, and I will try to not invite those naysayers to work with me. I'm very, very selective these days. I probably invite in 1 out of 5 people that I talk to. I'm super picky because we have a long line of people that want to. And I think now I just want to work with great people that are fun, right? I mean, my husband is biking all the day. He's retired, like I could be, like on, I don't know, on a hike. So if I want
Yeah.
to,
I want
but
his
if I want to
life.
change people's lives, I want to work with the people that make me feel happy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that you're at a place where you can do that, where you've gone through the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs, you have the experience, and you're at a comfortable enough place where now you can dictate exactly how you want, what you want.
yeah.
So that's amazing. So
Yeah, I'm
congratulations.
happy. Thank you. And now I hope to get that to a lot of other people. So
I hope so, man. I think overall the happier people will be, the more economically stable, the better society will be overall. I think if people find, and it's not that easy. It's not like everyone can find their passion. Sometimes you find it at 50 years old, right? Whatever it is. But I think more fulfilled people with a purpose in life, I think overall that builds like just a better
oh,
society.
absolutely.
So
Yeah, love that.
yeah.
So yeah,
Ilana,
that's
thank you
awesome.
so much. This was
Thank you,
amazing.
thank you. I enjoyed
This
it.
was Yeah, this was one of my favorite podcasts. I had a lot of fun. So thank you for
I
coming on.
loved it. Thank you.
Where can people find you? Where can people follow you? What are the best places?
IlanaGolan.com. It's probably the easiest one. And there's like LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm everywhere. So
Where are you most active? Which like social media are you most
probably
active
LinkedIn
on?
and Facebook are my two. I do have a group on Facebook. It's free. One of the groups is free, and it's all about reputation boost and career leaps. So, people that want to join a free group, tons of tips there. But beyond that, it's basically LinkedIn and this one. So,
Awesome.
yeah, I loved it.
Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
I enjoyed it.
Uh, Hopefully in 2023, maybe after, or 2022 or 2023, maybe we'll be able to climb a mountain together.
Sounds amazing. Thank you.
All right, Ilana, take care.